Mark Bullock, BMA Biotech.
All right, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us here today. BMA Biotech, start off quickly by letting people know what it is you're doing.
So BMA Biotech specialise in a wide range of chemicals for primarily the oil and gas industry, but we also cover the facilities maintenance sector, wastewater treatment, and we're starting to expand into the environmental services industry as well.
And what shale plays are you guys in currently?
So in the US, we're primarily focused on the Permian and the Eagle Ford because obviously they're central to us. But we are starting to focus our efforts now of moving up to the Bakken. And also we're looking at moving up to the tar sands in Canada as well, in various areas.
That should be pretty exciting. Is that you are seeing that kind of growth though because of the new service that you guys are providing?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the new service. What we're now seeing across the industry as a whole is that there's a new way of thinking starting to come about chemicals. The conventional chemicals obviously are petrochemical based. So due to the negative effects that they can have on not just the health and safety of employees, but also the wider environment. As the US and the rest of the world become more environmentally conscious, they're starting to try and phase them out. But there are very few companies like ours that actually do, products which are environmentally friendly and, actually function correctly in their given application.
Talk to me a little bit about that environmental movement that's going on. Everybody seems to want to be greener these days. Talk to me about the environmental services side of the oil and gas industry.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously when you get an oil spill, it has to be cleaned up, or E&P waste spill, whatever. It has to be cleaned. There's no two ways around that. And what we're seeing is, the long-held thought that, they can use X, Y, and Z products which apparently save them money, or digging and hauling to dispose of the soil, is no longer effective because we're seeing a lot more what I would call charlatans within the industry who are claiming to have products which don't actually do what they say. I'll give you an example. We know of a company who claims that their product turns crude oil into sand. It's just not possible. It's not even probable. All it basically is a type of high-grade detergent, which in short is basically encapsulating the oil and pushing it further down into the subsurface. So it may seem revolutionary on the face of it, but when you actually dig into the scientific side of it, it genuinely doesn't work. It's just creating a far worse problem for whoever's employing these guys, and a worse environmental profile of the industry because it's just not working. And that's where we come in because, we've seen where our products, we measure our products not only on their performance, but also on how they enrich the environment. So when we make a product, we look at, not just the usability for the client, but also how do we make sure that our products aren't going to have a negative impact. So, if it's a microbial product, and there's a lot of bad PR about microbial products in the industry because they are temperature tolerant, like all living organisms. But if you know how to balance a formulation correctly, you can get outstanding results, which is what we're seeing. With our chemical side of things, we don't do in-situ soil washing with the chemicals because this is where the big downfall is, that people are just basically washing their soil in situ and pushing the contamination deeper into the subsurface, where we've developed a unit that you can wash the soil, pass it through this unit, and it splits off the chemical one way, it separates out the soil to another area of the unit, and then takes out the crude oil or E&P waste to another area.
How about the accountability behind this? Oftentimes, at least I've heard, cleanup companies can come in, but the oil company, the service provider, I guess I assumed it was the oil company, but it might not be. Whoever that company is that's oftentimes doing the hiring ends up being the one who's accountable for it, not the spill up cleanup company. Is that still the case?
Yeah, that's still across the US. Across the rest of the world as well. It's basically anyone who's caused the spill is liable for what they call cradle to grave. So even if you bring in a spill company that claims to have cleaned it up, and in 3 years' time you suddenly get leaching into a nearby lake, and it can be determined that it actually is the original oil that you had allegedly had cleaned up 3 years previous, you're still liable for that cleanup. So you're not just liable for the cleanup the second time, you're also liable for the environmental impacts you caused on anything around you. So it's, if you do not do it correctly the first time, then you're just leaving yourself open to, or service companies / operators are leaving themselves open to potentially, environmental infringements.
What's the biggest trend right now you're seeing in your niche side of it? You mentioned it in situ earlier. Of course, I was thinking of ex-situ and remediation and all these different words that come into it. What side of the cleanups are you seeing the biggest opportunity or the growth?
We're seeing the ex-situ more because, ex-situ basically means that you're removing it from the original site of contamination and putting it into another area until you can clean it adequately. We do all of our cleanups on site. So there's not actually moving any contaminated soil around anywhere. So that's one of the biggest niches, because again, when you compare that to the dig and haul method, so the dig and haul basically is you bring in a company who will dig up the soil, who will put it into a roll-off box and take it to another facility for disposal. So you have to have a paper train from the point of origin to the point of disposal. And then you will then have to have paperwork to show that it's been disposed of correctly. So again, it all brings in costs and regulatory compliance, which again can be a nightmare in itself. So we're seeing our ex-situ on-site treatment making more headway than in-situ bioremediation, because again, bioremediation is in itself it's effective in the right temperatures. But again, it's costly in the sense of, the way you treat it. If it's in situ with bioremediation, you've got to drill boreholes, put in shafts with holes in to pump the product down and push it through the one side. It's comparable to fracking, basically, in situ bioremediation. You in a sense, you're fracking the soil with microbes to get the contamination out.
In Texas, is this still kind of underneath the Railroad Commission of Texas?
Yep, Texas is the Railroad Commission. They do an outstanding job at what they do. So, they're very thorough, the state of Texas, on the railroad side there. Yes, there are some regulations that were put in 1993 or before that. So, hopefully they'll update them to accommodate the changes in the industry in the sense of the new products out there.
Mm-hmm. But okay, so yeah, trying to track some of these different things with the different organizations that are underneath them. I was going to ask you, is it difficult from state to state? I don't know about different states you're in, but maybe like a New Mexico or a Louisiana or Colorado or anything like that. Or are you just still in Texas and just getting interest from other states now, or have you started to get into other states and you're finding that there's bigger challenges? Or
well, typically we operate in the state of Texas, but our product has been used on various projects outside of the state of Texas with other companies, or we've gone along and assisted other companies when they've been doing cleanups. And we find on the whole, the regulatory side, the agencies, providing you're doing what you're meant to be doing, don't have an issue. Providing you can clearly display to them that your product works, your method is sound, and you actually know what you're doing. It's quite an easy process. Mm-hmm. But if they get the impression that you genuinely don't know what you're doing and you're trying to pull a fast one and cut it and run, basically, that's when the issues, they start to scratch the surface a little bit more. We've heard reports where we heard of one company who claimed that they were working in a state and the state was so impressed with their product to this on-site person took a sample and took it to their home and started playing about with it. And the first question that was raised when we did bring this up to the regulatory department was, if we're going to test a product, we're certainly not going to do it in someone's house. It's going to be in a lab setting. So, it's you've got to be careful what you hear from companies, because sometimes you'll hear fantastical stories that they've got such a good rapport, but actually in truth they haven't. It's just, talk is cheap.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. A lot of this stuff, of course, you get into exaggerators and guys who talk about bigger than 10 Super Bowls that they can do and that sort of thing. And is that starting to self-correct a little bit more within your niche, the environmental services?
It's yes and no. It's one of those ones where, do you want it fast and cheap, or do you want it, expensive and good? It all comes down to that. And what we're seeing is that these companies can do, lower rates than we can, because, they're genuinely buying their stuff for like 3 cents a gallon because it's that superb. It actually doesn't work, in a sense of it doesn't turn crude oil into sand. Where we are the ones that say, well, no, we're going to charge you X number of dollars per cubic feet or per cubic meter, whichever they want to be charged by, because, we know what we're doing. We've got a multitude of experience from the team that we've put together, and our products have been designed specifically for this. It's not something that we found that can clean, I don't know, a wood burning stove, for instance, of carbon. We've genuinely developed this product specifically for chemical soil washing. So,
Mark Bullock with his BMA Biotech. Kind of talk to me a little bit about what's next for you guys.
Next is we're slowly getting bigger and bigger projects come through the door. We're starting to make a lot more tie-ins to a lot of companies within the industry. We're slowly getting out there. Slowly, it's actually quickly in some respects, because we're seeing. I mean, up in Colorado, there's this big shift that it's and now a negative view of oil and gas, and the chemicals and the production methods, are now under scrutiny, where our chemicals, are very safe. So that's where we're getting our upshift, is because people are coming to us and saying, hey, we need data for the biodegradability of your product. Can you supply it? Well, yes, there you go. So when they go back to, the state or whoever, that they can see that they're genuinely trying to change. So that's where we're seeing our biggest function is at the minute, is people are coming to us because there is a need for change, and we're able to provide that service to them.
How about the Permian Basin down there? What's kind of the activity happening, or what are you seeing, reading, hearing from your customers?
We're seeing steady growth. In June, there was a reduction in the volume of oil produced. But again, it's one of those ones where wells are being depleted, within the first year by 70%. So obviously that's why there's a continual drilling phase going on, because, investors need to be paid back for the money they're putting in. So, the production is there. It's just the question of how many wells need to be drilled to keep up with that production. But unfortunately, now it's coming to a point where investors want a return. So we're seeing a lot more companies are sticking with the wells they've got, reducing drilling activity, and just trying to basically make a return for their investors that way.
How about on the chemical side of things? I mean, you guys are in the environmental services. You deal with a lot of chemicals. You mentioned Colorado. You mentioned Texas. Up in North Dakota, a lot of times it's, 93%, I think, is private land. So, you got state-to-state regulation, that sort of thing. Of course, you got the EPA, but at the end of the day, I don't care where you're at, you're going to have spills, whether it's salt water, whether it's crude oil, whether it's, loading bananas on a truck, things spill. And so how deep do some of these things get, and do they get all the way to your level with the individual chemicals, or do they just kind of blanket an industry? Do you know what I mean by that? How deep do these studies get sometimes?
It's all a question of how long is a piece of string, what we're seeing across the board is, a lot more states now are becoming environmentally conscious. They don't want to do anything that's going to harm the environment or people. So they are taking a closer look at the chemical side because, again, I mean, you look at 98% of the products in the industry, from production all the way through to refining. A lot of them are petrochemical based. So in a sense, it's derivatives of crude oil. So what we're seeing is, if you can prove that you've got a genuine product that genuinely is an environmentally friendly and sustainable product at a cost-effective price, the operators are very interested in it, and they obviously want to use it. But also, states are looking at it as, we're working in partnership, in a sense, with the operators to try and help them reduce their impacts on, the negative PR. Because, I mean, we've all seen the studies where they say this chemical causes birth defects, or this chemical, gives you a greater chance to getting cancer. And yet, in some respects, these studies may be slightly slanted towards one view, or the author may not have a credible background. But in some respects, there is a lot more research out there against what these products can do than what there is for their environmental profile. So that's what, it's a fine line between getting a product that works and having it environmentally friendly to having a product that doesn't work and isn't environmentally friendly. So, we're seeing a lot of companies now are mislabeling their products just to sell them. I've seen people claim biodegradability. So I've naturally asked them, I've called them out in a sense, well, what timescale are we looking at? Are we looking at 1 week, 1 year, what? And I just get met with blank stares, or they just completely blank me and walk off, or block me on social media. Because, we're not in the business to say to our clients, well, our product's biodegradable without having anything to back it up. And a lot of companies, they, do have biodegradable products. But the question is if they can't back up what they're saying, then obviously, if you go and try and sell this to a state regulatory authority because you want to go and, use it in, either the upstream, the midstream, or downstream sector, and it suddenly turns out that this product isn't biodegradable. And what it means by biodegradable is that it basically breaks down to water and carbon dioxide within a certain amount of time, and there's no trace of it. There are hundreds of tests that can be used to prove the biodegradability of a product. So, you've got to make sure that the right testing is being used on the chemicals, because if not, all data going forward is basically null and void.
How much of your job becomes liaison or educator or diplomat when it comes to regulators and oil companies, energy companies?
Quite a lot, actually. We're seeing that a lot more operators are coming to us and saying, hey, we're having issues, we're talking to the state because they don't understand the science behind the product or whatever. Could you go and talk to them? So, we are seeing a lot more upturn in that, in a sense of, our products, like many other new products coming out, contain newly discovered compounds or reworked compounds to make them more safe and effective. So, your average person in the railroad commission, for instance, who's got an engineering background within the oil and gas industry but has never dealt with chemistry, doesn't quite understand the science behind it. So then we've obviously got to go through the whole area of saying, right, this is X, Y, and Z of the product. This is what this does. This is what this does. This is what this does. And this is why we've included it in the product, or stuff like that. And it's, in a sense, it is tedious and time consuming, but it also helps the regulatory authorities better understand what is now out there compared to what was out there in the early days of the industry.
What do you want people to remember from this interview? Kind of the walkaway, the takeaway from it. People listening, environmental services. There's a lot of accountability, vetting on of companies right now. Some companies are not around that were trying to be around 3 years ago. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, overall, even if you don't use my company, if people don't use my company, it's always make sure that you do your due diligence of the company and of the products. Don't just take a salesman's word, and just because he may show you a fancy demonstration of him spraying or that person spraying a chemical on the ground on an oil spill and it suddenly disappears. Think about it like this. If you were to put a fish tank on a table, a small size aquarium or whatever, put a micro filter in the top, layer the soil in there, and then spray the product on, what are you going to see that ends up in the tank? That is the easiest way to debunk a product. Because what we've seen people saying hydrogen peroxide, it's biodegradable, it makes the oil biodegradable. No, it is biodegradable. The hydrogen peroxide is biodegradable because most of it is water, but it doesn't do anything to the oil other than make it far easier to remove from the soil. So just make sure that when a salesman or a company is telling you that they can do this or their product does that, listen to what they're telling you. I mean, Google is at your fingertips. So when someone's saying to you, it turns, for instance, crude oil into sand, just Google how to turn crude oil into sand, and guaranteed you're not going to get the results you're looking for because it's not physically possible. Or they say it's biodegradable. Okay, what test did you perform? And it's quite easy. You just go online and you can look at the test. You can look at the testing method. You can see a sample of a testing report. So you say, well, can I see your testing report? And if they've got the testing report, they're not going to say, well, I'll send it to you next week. Because that basically means they don't have the testing report. They're going to try and get it done in a short space of time, then send it to you. So just do your due diligence on the product, on the company, see what available data is out there, because you'll be surprised there is a lot more data out there than people actually assume. We're seeing it with a lot of our raw materials, where a lot of our raw materials were developed in Europe. So there's a great database in Europe called the REACH database, which is basically an encyclopedia of chemicals and raw materials, and it will tell you exactly, what each chemical does, what its biodegradability is, and you've got the data at your fingertips. So it all comes down: do your due diligence, make sure what you're being told is the truth, and make sure that in the long run you are staying compliant with state and federal regulations. So we're not going to see where, Colorado is a prime example, and other states that are trying to, in a sense, ban the industry, because the reason the industry is trying to be banned is because people see it as a corrupt, money-grabbing, industry, where in fact 99.99% of people in the industry are genuine. They have a family to support, and all they're trying to do is do their job with what they're being told by other people. So it's, just do your homework.